evolution of spirituality from ancient rituals to modern awakening.
Wonderful. So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Not directing the voice loudly in any certain direction, but yes, I am.
You're perfectly okay. Let them eat cake.
So the whole idea with these rallies is to share the information, the knowledge from all these wonderful demonstrators that we have here. So, as always, ladies first.
Absolutely.
Lovely Susan.
Thank you.
And Susan's talk is the evolution of spirituality from ancient rituals to modern awakening. So there will be the presentation by Susan,
Yes.
followed by questions and answers. And before we go there, no, we don't communicate with dinosaurs, all right? So I don't want to hear that question again. Thank you. So...
I don't know. Might have been involved in one of the ancient rituals. You wouldn't know.
Oh, you sort it out then. There you go.
Okay.
Susan, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon again, everyone. And so, you know, I believe the last time I was here, I spoke about where is spiritualism going? What's going to happen? Oh my God, what about the children? All of that kind of thing. So I decided, when I thought about it, I said, well, where did we come from? Never mind where we're going. If we actually really begin to understand where we have come from and who we truly are, it might assist us to have an easier route to this future that we all talk about. So I decided to, I had some dusty ideas in the back of my mind anyway, but I did, like any good researcher, I rolled up my sleeves and went on Google, as you do, and I picked up information. So I really feel, and I hope you enjoy that, I'm going to bring you on a fascinating journey. Now, I'm not a theologian, I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to go in depth into anything particularly. And don't worry, because I'm not either going to be bringing in dry history lectures and things like that, because you know it's not nap time, if that's okay. So I decided to have a look at the ancient civilizations who laid, I believe, the spiritual groundwork, the framework that still echoes into today, into our beliefs. And these practices have morphed and merged and evolved into the modern spiritual scene. It's wonderfully weird, eclectic, and it's a very wild landscape at times. But it is where ancient wisdom meets yoga mats and moon rituals and the occasional crystal collection. So it's nice how it's morphed in that way. So from the flickering torchlight of the Paleolithic caves to the calming blue glow on our meditation apps, on our smartphones, humans have been on a quest to connect with something bigger, and something bigger than ourselves. It's something mysterious, a bit magical maybe, and deeply meaningful. And on this journey we'll dive into the heart of ancient civilizations, and these were places where gods just didn't live in the clouds, they popped by for lunch. You know, it was part of their being. And back then, the stars weren't just pretty, they were celestial GPS systems, helping decide everything from harvests and to who should or shouldn't marry. Thunderstorms were divine opinion pieces, and earthquakes were God's thoughts. And along this way, I'll share how early spiritual practices gradually leveled up, from simple spiritual rituals around firelight to complex systems of beliefs passed down like sacred family recipes. Knowledge moved from the wise masters to the eager initiates, often in whispers, or symbols, or maybe just cryptic vibes. And even now, in our world of Wi-Fi and wellness trends, these ancient echoes are still with us. You'll spot them in the rise of mindfulness, the search of purpose, or that metaphysical itch we all have that we just can't quite scratch. And through it all, I hope to trace a single golden thread, which is, of course, humanity's age-old longing to find its place in the vast, mysterious, and somewhat confusing universe. So I look to primitive beginnings, long before the first temples were built, before doctrines were drafted or scriptures rolled out like spiritual bestsellers. Early humans lived in close, awe-filled connection with the natural world. Their sacred texts weren't carved in stone. They were written in the stars. They were the rustlings of the trees, the migration of animals, and the changing colours of the sky. Nature wasn't just scenery, it was a teacher, a guide, and in many ways the divine presence. And the rising of the setting sun wasn't, well, it was, but it wasn't just a daily event. It was a cosmic performance. The changing of the seasons were not just a reason to swap around your wardrobe, but it was a profound shift that told stories of birth, of death, and of rebirth. Every lightning storm and eclipse or strange noise in the dark wasn't weather or wildlife. It was a message from something bigger, something mysterious. And spirituality back then wasn't about following rules or mesmerizing prayers. It was a deeply personal and communal attempt to make sense of the great unknown. The big existential questions of the day might have been, why did the crops thrive one year and then suddenly decide to go on strike the next? And where do people go when they disappear from the land of the living? Do they just vanish? And then there's the moon, how it disappears periodically. An elusive moment that challenged a sense of certainty. And even the most steadfast lights in the night sky can fade from view, reminding us that mystery is woven into the fabric of the universe. And for those living in earlier times, these weren't just poetic musings. They were urgent, burning questions. And in a world without textbooks and Google searches, answers had to be sought through experience, belief, and wisdom. They also relied on their traditions, which were handed down. So instead, early humans turned to their senses, watching, listening, and reflecting on the mysteries around them. They didn't just seek answers. They approached these questions with a mix of reverence, awe, and plenty of imagination, as we can imagine. And after all, when you're scratching your head over the moon's sudden absence and why your crops are acting up like moody teenagers, a little imagination might go a long way to assist. And in many ways, these primal spiritual beliefs were humanity's first user manual for existence, part survival strategy and part cosmic poetry. And while they might not have had organized religion, they definitely had organized wonder. A shared sense of that life was infused with mystery. That word again, mystery. Everything is so mysterious. And that the earth itself was alive with meaning. Among humanity's oldest and most enduring spiritual paths, which is rooted in rhythm and the rich with ancestral wisdom, are shamanic traditions. These vivid, heartbeat-driven practices interwoven with the indigenous cultures worldwide. And long before organized religions set up shop with official titles and theological debates, shamans were already at work, tuning into the unseen like cosmic radio operators, albeit with feathered headgear and serious responsibilities. These shamans weren't just your average folk. They were healers, seers, storytellers, and spiritual troubleshooters rolled into one. Revered and sometimes slightly feared, they served as intermediaries between the physical world and the vast, mysterious realm of the spirit. And when the usual explanations fell short, as strange sicknesses or surreal dreams or crops going rogue, it might be nature's not so subtle hint that it's time to bring in the shaman. And through methods that may seem a little wild to the modern eyes, trance states, rhythmic drumming, hypnotic chanting, dances that would shake the soul loose. Shamans journeyed beyond the visible world. They connected with ancestors, animal spirits, elemental forces, and otherworldly guides in search of healing, insight, and balance. And no, they didn't need Wi-Fi for those downloads. But what they did use was a deep connection to the rhythms of nature and the pulse of the universe. But here's the thing. For these cultures, the spiritual wasn't just a once-a-week lofty experience that was confined to temples or special holidays. It was life itself. The spiritual realm wasn't off in the clouds. It was in the forest. It was in the fire and the wind, and even in the stew that's bubbling on that fire. Everything was sacred. The boundary between worlds was paper thin. And in this holistic, woven into everything view of existence reminds us that spirituality didn't begin as a doctrine. It began as a dance with mystery, a dance with meaning, and with the aching beauty of being alive in a world that was both magical and real. And then I moved forward then to spirituality in ancient civilizations such as Mesopotamia and Egypt. And as humanity put down roots and shifted from the roaming wilds to building cities, figuring out farming, the plumbing, and of course the joys of tax collection, spirituality also went under a glow-up. No longer were fireside stories or shamanic journeys under the stars. Spiritual life became more structured, more elaborate, and perhaps a bit more bureaucratic. In the lush, fertile cradles of civilization in the river valleys of Mesopotamia and the banks of the mighty Nile, grand religious systems began to take shape. They weren't just belief systems, they were entire cosmic blueprints, complete with gods, rules, rituals, and a spiritual customer service department manned by priests. To the Egyptians, spirituality wasn't an add-on, it was the foundation of everything. Spiritual principles influenced politics, daily chores, funeral, and even fashion choices. The divine wasn't just out there, it was deeply embedded in the here and now. Gods like Isis and Ra weren't distant abstractions. They were present, powerful forces shaping the cycles of nature, the fate of the pharaohs, and the journey of every soul after death. At the heart of Egyptian spiritual life was Mahat, which is the principle of harmony, justice, and cosmic order. And keeping Mahat intact wasn't optional, it required precision. Rituals had to be performed just right. Temples had to be maintained, and the deceased needed to be properly mummified and equipped with all the essentials for their long trek through the other world. And meanwhile, over in Mesopotamia, let's not forget that we were going there too, the land between the river Tigris and Euphrates, I think it's in around Turkey and those places, that's where I believe that is. And it's the region that's known for being the cradle of civilization, where first cities, first writing systems, and advanced technologies, they emerged from that area, and spiritual life became very rich, although perhaps a bit more anxiety-inducing. And the gods there were very mighty and very moody, and humans were constantly, it seemed, trying to stay on their good side. Offerings, prayers, and sacred laws helped to keep the divine-human relationship running smoothly, like an ancient version of cosmic diplomacy, I would think. But don't be fooled. It wasn't just about keeping the gods happy. Mesopotamian spirituality gave people a powerful framework for making sense of life's big questions. Why am I here? What does the future hold? And how do I stay in balance with the forces of the universe? So it wasn't all incense burning and idol polishing. There was a deep philosophical inquiry wrapped into these rituals. Both civilizations show us that as societies became more complex, so too did their spiritual practices. But the heart of it remained, a desire to understand the mysteries of life, to find meaning, and to stay in sync with something greater than ourselves, even if it meant mesmerizing 100 sacred hymns or participating in an 8-hour ceremony in the desert heat. Can you imagine what that was like? No showers. So as civilizations matured and people became less preoccupied with immediate survival, there was more time for soul searching, more time for spirituality, and it began to turn inward. And the focus shift from appeasing storm gods and ensuring a good harvest to something more personal, the transformation of the self. And it wasn't just about honouring the divine, it was about becoming something deeper and wiser and more awake. So enter the Greco-Roman world, where alongside toga parties and philosophical debates, there emerged a mysterious, enchanting undercurrent of spiritual experimentation, the mystery cults. Now, these weren't your average Sunday services. These were secretive, elite, and often dramatic spiritual communities that promised not just knowledge, but revelation. The Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece centered around the myth of Demeter and Persephone. I knew I'd get that wrong. Persephone. Were far more than mythic retellings. They involved secret rites, initiations, and ritual reenactments that symbolized death and rebirth. Participants weren't just hearing a story. They were living a transformative experience that promised profound insight into the nature of life and death and the possibility of what lies beyond. But no spoilers allowed. Initiates were bound by oaths that when they became so strict that to break them came with often catastrophic and dire consequences that really we wouldn't want to test out. And these cults weren't just about mesmerizing doctrine or following strict moral codes. Instead, they offered raw mystical encounters, experiences that shake your sense of self, challenge your assumptions, and invite deep reflection on the nature of reality. Initiation rituals were often intense, symbolic journeys meant to dissolve the ego and open the door to higher truths. It was less how to behave and more who are you really. So symbols, myths, and stories weren't just for decoration. They were spiritual tools. Think of them as encrypted messages from the universe, waiting to be unlocked by those willing to look below the surface. And when they were, initiates often walked away transformed, not just informed, but transformed and awakened. And these mystery traditions didn't just vanish with the fall of Greece and Rome. They planted seeds. Their inward turning focus inspired a lineage of mystical traditions that would blossom across time and geography. For example, Gnosticism sought to escape the flawed material world and return to their divine origins, with its emphasis on hidden knowledge and the divine spark within. And then there's Hermeticism, which views the universe as a unified whole, where the divine is both internal and beyond the physical world. The inner and outer worlds are interconnected with its transmutative worldview and believe that as above, so below. And then later Sufism in the Islamic world and Kabbalah in the Jewish mysticism, both of which speak of the soul's journey back to union with the divine. Across these systems, one common thread gleams. The divine isn't just up there in the sky or out there in a temple. It is within us. Spirituality became less about controlling the external world and more about transforming the inner one. And so now we're jumping ahead to the 19th century, which rolled in with the clatter of factory wheels, steam engines, and the proud hum of scientific discovery. The world seemed to be getting louder, faster, and more logical. Faith, once rooted in century-old traditions, found itself a little rattled by the new age, the age of reason. And that was about shifting from faith and tradition to logic and evidence, laying the groundwork for modern science, politics, and secular thinking. And it must have been tough to keep your mind on celestial beings and mystical pursuits when everybody was getting obsessed with electricity and telegrams. But just as humanity leaned hard into industry and the I believe it when I see it culture, a counter-culture stirred, one that whispered of unseen realms, ghostly visitors, and truths that scientists couldn't quite measure in a laboratory. And thus, modern spiritualism was born. A movement that suggested the afterlife was not some far-off, foggy destination, but just a thin veil away, and that veil could be lifted with just the right medium, the right mood, and perhaps a few mysterious knocks on the wall. And at the heart of this movement were the Fox sisters from upstate New York, who in 1848 claimed they could communicate with spirits through strange rappings. Whether you call it a hoax or a miracle or an excellent piece of spooky theatre, the story went viral in a pre-Instagram sense, and it launched an entire cultural phenomenon. Yeah. Told you I had that word in there somewhere. Suddenly, seances became all the rage. Parlours across America and Europe were filled with candles, planchettes, and hopeful people trying to reach Aunt Mildred or ask Grandpa where he buried the family silver. But this wasn't just ghost stories and creaky floorboards. Spiritualism offered genuine comfort during a time of intense social upheaval. The 19th century was no gentle stroll. It was an era of war, disease, and high mortality rates. And in a world where loved ones often vanished without warning, the idea that death wasn't a full stop, but a comma in the sentence of existence. And this brought solace and sometimes closure. But more radically, spiritualism also challenged traditional religion by saying, maybe you don't need a church or clergy to connect with the divine. You didn't have to be a saint or a scholar, just spiritually curious and possibly in possession of a good table for rapping. And what's more, the movement opened doors, especially for women. And at a time when the pulpits were still mostly off limits and politics even more so, women emerged as powerful mediums and spiritual leaders. And in many ways, the seance circle became a subtle, and I would know that sometimes not so subtle, form of social rebellion. Many spiritualist women were also involved in progressive causes like women's suffrage and give me a moment with this word. Abolitionism, which was a movement advocating for the immediate and complete end of slavery and the emancipation of enslaved people. And one prominent woman who embodied this connection between spiritualism and progressive causes was Sojourner Truth. Well, firstly, I think that's an amazing name. When I came across it, I just thought, how wonderful is that? She was an African-American abolitionist and women's rights advocate who also had deep spiritualist beliefs. Sojourner often spoke about receiving divine inspiration and believed her mission was guided by God. And her famous Ain't I a Woman speech linked gender and racial equality. And she used both her spirituality and her oratory skills to fight for emancipation and suffrage. Spiritualism became not just a mystical calling, but a platform for public influence. So while the 19th century may have been the era of steam and steel, it was also a time when people looked beyond the material, beyond the rational, and into the flickering unknown, hoping to hear a voice or to catch a message or simply know that we are never alone. As the 20th century unfolded with its world wars and moon landings and rock concerts and cultural revolutions, spirituality didn't just survive the whirlwind, it reinvented itself, and not just once, but over and over again. It became eclectic, experimental, and at times delightfully eccentric. That's where I fit in. Welcome to the world of New Age spirituality, where incense meets psychology, where astrology chats with neuroscience, and you can align your chakras while doing breath work in a geodesic dome. The New Age movement, which began to take root in the mid-20th century and blossomed in full psychedelic colour in the 1960s and 70s, was a kind of spiritual mixtape. It pulled from everywhere: Eastern philosophy, Western mysticism, ancient esoteric traditions, modern psychology, and even the occasional alien transmission. It was less about following a singular path and more about building your own custom journey with a bit of yoga here and a dash of fortune telling there and maybe some chanting under a full moon for good measure. A huge part of this spiritual expansion was the growing influence of Eastern traditions on Western culture. And we see there the Buddhism's deep insights into the mind and the Taoism poetic wisdom about flowing with the universe rather than pushing it. And these weren't just philosophical imports, they were revelations for many. And for many in the post-war West, especially during the counter-cultural wave of the 60s and 70s, Eastern spirituality offered an antidote to materialism, conformity, and existential despair. Spiritual teachers like Sri Ramakrishna. Can I just get a drop of water here, actually? Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. Just a drop there. Okay. So, Sri Ramakrishna and his profound spiritual wisdom, Thich Nhat Hanh and his gentle Zen teachings on mindfulness, and Ram Dass, whose journey from psychedelics to spirituality inspired countless people to be here and now. We're here and now culture. Excuse me. So concepts like karma and reincarnation and meditative awareness entered everyday conversation alongside horoscopes and dreams of spiritual retreats in Bali. And meanwhile, a range of alternative practices began to emerge and steadily gain acceptance within mainstream society. Crystal healing, chakra balancing, Reiki, past life regression, and tarot weren't just fringe curiosities anymore. They became part of a spiritual vocabulary for people seeking meaning outside of traditional religion. And so whether you're aligning your aura or trying to figure out if you were once an Atlantean priestess in a past life, the vibe was about exploring, experimenting, but still getting really personal. And then came the psychologists. They joined in the spiritual conversation with their own mystical twist, and Carl Jung, for instance, gave us archetypes, the collective conscious and the collective unconscious, and the idea that dreams might just be cosmic emails from your soul. And later, thinkers in transpersonal psychology bridged the gap between inner healing and spiritual awakening, suggesting that therapy could be more than just unpacking your childhood. It could be the path to enlightenment. And at its core, this new wave of spirituality wasn't about rigid belief systems. It was about direct experience, inner transformation, and the growing realization that spirituality and psychology were not enemies, they were dance partners. The divine wasn't just out there in the heavens, it was here, waiting to be discovered within the stillness of meditation, or in the pages of a Jungian journal, or sometimes the quiet shimmer of a crystal in your palm. And so the New Age may have had its cliches, but it also cracked open a space for countless people to rediscover their own inner spark and realize that spiritual path could be as unique as the soul walking it. And as the new millennium dawned, so did a new spiritual landscape. One shaped not by temples or dusty scrolls, but by Wi-Fi, wellness culture, and the endless scroll of social media. The 21st century spirituality didn't disappear. It just slipped on yoga pants, downloaded a meditation app, and started tweeting about shadow work. This era has seen a remarkable shift. Organized religion continues to decline in many parts of the world, particularly in the West, but spiritual seeking is still going strong. We are in the age of spiritual but not religious, and where people design their own blend of beliefs and practices from various traditions which best fits their personal journey. One person's spiritual path might be breathwork or full moon rituals, plant medicine, which is a big one, soul journeys, and a Monday morning podcast on neuroscience. And others might be around silent meditation, retreats, daily prayer, studying ancient scriptures, or practicing acts of service and compassion within their community. Excuse me. I picked up a wee cough somewhere. However, at the heart of this evolution is the mainstreaming of mindfulness and meditation, propelled largely by the global interest in Buddhism and Eastern contemplative practices. What was once the domain of monks and mystics is now accessible via sleek apps, bringing ancient techniques to anyone with a smartphone and a few minutes to spare. Corporations have even adopted mindfulness because apparently inner peace boosts productivity. And therapists now regularly prescribe meditation for everything from anxiety to burnout. And the wellness industry has become a spiritual juggernaut of its own, with retreats and crystals, essential oils, manifestation journals, cacao ceremonies, and all those energy healing modalities that are there aglow. Spirituality today often walks hand in hand with personal health, self-care, and Instagram aesthetics. While critics sometimes call this a commercialization or even a commodification of the sacred, Many find genuine transformation in these spaces, and the emphasis has shifted from salvation to self-realization, from dogma to embodied experience. Technology, once seen as the great spiritual detractor, is now a central part of the modern mystic's toolkit. We stream spiritual services, as we do, live stream sound baths, share astrology memes, and consult AI for our tarot readings. The internet has created global spiritual communities that go beyond geography and tradition. You can chant with a teacher in India from your kitchen and pool. You can learn about Norse runes, Buddhist koans, and quantum healing on the same YouTube blast. The boundaries between science and spirit, ancient and new, sacred and secular, are constantly being blurred, and sometimes beautifully so. So also gaining prominence is a renewed interest in ancestral traditions, indigenous wisdom, and non-structured spirituality. Many seekers are moving away from the one-size-fits-all model, returning to their roots, or respectfully learning from others to build a more grounded, ethical, and inclusive spiritual practice. And perhaps what defines 21st century spirituality is its diversity and personal agency. There's no single path, no ultimate authority, and no universal dogma. And despite its many forms, this modern movement is bound by a timeless drive, the yearning for meaning and connection in a world that's in constant flux. And in the midst of our hyper-digital lives, many of us are still searching for what our ancestors once sought for, under the stars and in their temples, through trance or through silence, a way to feel whole. And are we looking for the reminder that we are not just emails and to-do lists, but something more radiant, something perhaps divine? And as we stand at the threshold of an increasingly complex and rapidly changing world, spirituality is posed for yet another transformation. Not in the sense of disappearing, but in adapting and evolving in ways that we might never have imagined. The quest for meaning, for connection and divine existence is far from obsolete. Rather, it is becoming more intricate, global, and personal than ever before. We see the rise of virtual temples, online rituals, and AI-guided meditations. And just as meditation apps have helped millions embrace mindfulness, now these virtual spaces like online retreats and digital healing circles allow people to connect with communities without geographical limitations. And AI, in its own fascinating way, is now guiding some in their journeys of inner discovery, offering prompts of affirmations and digital guides to spiritual growth. And while this may seem strange to some, for others it represents the future of spiritual exploration, where technology amplifies rather than diminishes the quest for the divine. And at the same time as we venture further into the 21st century, there is a growing sense of turning back to the earth, to the cycles of nature, to bring back an acknowledgement that our spiritual well-being is inextricably tied to the health of this planet. And in the face of climate crisis, many people are beginning to see that it is not just an ecological emergency. The earth, in all its beauty and fragility, is now being reclaimed as sacred. Practices like eco-spirituality are gaining prominence, inviting people to recognize that caring for their environment is not just a political or scientific issue, it is a sacred duty, a spiritual practice that connects us to the broader web of life. Indigenous wisdom, long marginalized or misunderstood, is coming back into view, reminding us of nature's sacredness. There is a growing movement of earth-based spiritual practices where rituals are rooted in the seasons, the elements, and the cycles of the moon. And for many, the path to spiritual awakening today means reconnecting with the earth as a living, breathing, sentient being, sometimes or something that nourishes, teaches, and awakens us to the rhythms of existence. While some continue to look outward for answers, many are turning inwards, exploring the mysteries of the mind, the body, and the soul, through practices that are designed to enhance self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-expression. The focus has shifted beyond external rituals to inner cultivation, with practices like breathwork, mindfulness, nervous system regulation, and somatic techniques. These are increasingly becoming more well known and central to everyday life and to those seeking the spiritual path. And the tools of self-awareness are being used as keys to unlock deeper and more personal experiences of the sacred. Mindfulness is no longer confined to meditation cushions. It is in our workplaces, it is on our phones. And the integration of mindfulness into daily life is helping us reconnect with the present moment, offering relief from stress and a deeper connection to the body's natural rhythms. It is a kind of spiritual self-care that emphasizes nourishing the self from inside out, something we collectively need more than ever in an age that's defined by overwhelm and overstimulation. So in this unfolding future, the old and the new are not at odds. They are in dialogue. Ancient wisdom passed down through the generations offer deep roots, grounding us in timeless practices that carry the wisdom of the ages. Modern innovation, in turn, gives us wings. These wings offer us new ways of accessing and integrating that wisdom, that generational wisdom, and we can bring it in to help us bring peace and slow down this fast-paced life. And they do together when we work it right, because it can be sometimes a bit, you really have to work at it to blend it. But when it does, it forms a very dynamic synergy. And it guides us toward a single truth or a path, but it brings a richer spiritual life to you. And it brings you into your evolution and your spirituality. And it's through personal experience. So spirituality in all its forms remains a deeply human response to the mystery of being alive. The desire to understand what it means to be here, to be awake, and to be connected. We are still seekers. We are still storytellers. We are still soul journeyers, compelled to ask the great questions. Who am I? What am I? And why am I here? And as we look to spiritualism, we are reminded that this is not a destination, but a journey, a living, breathing process that will continue to unfold, evolve, and guide us as we navigate the mysteries of existence. And as we step further into this ever-accelerating future, one truth remains clear. The human spirit continues to yearn, to seek, and to question. And it is spiritualism, the uniquely human bridge between the seen and the unseen, that offers us both a compass and a comfort. Far from being a relic of the past, spiritualism stands as a living philosophy, evolving alongside us as we navigate this complex and wondrous journey of life. So from the table rapping of the 19th century to today's online healing circles and digital mediumship, spiritualism is constantly giving us a glimpse of what lies beyond the veil. It serves as a reminder that death is not a final stop, but a passage, and that life in all its expressions carries on. It offers not only a philosophy, but a practice of communion, healing, and of service. In connecting with spirit, we also learn how to connect more deeply with ourselves and one another. And perhaps most beautifully, spiritualism encourages us to embrace life not as a random occurrence, but as a purposeful unfolding, rich with opportunity for healing, learning, and love. It teaches that truth is not handed down just from the platform, but it is revealed through direct experience, inner knowing, and the quiet whispers of those who have gone before us. And in our modern search, beneath the apps and retreats and teachings, it is the same yearning that moved our ancestors to light fires under the stars and sing to the rising sun, a yearning to belong to something greater, to awaken to what has always been within us. And maybe it is time for us to reflect deeply on the fact that the roots of our spiritual journey stretch beyond time itself, intertwining through countless generations to awaken an eternal truth within us. The truth that within every person lies a spark of the divine, meant not to be just acknowledged, but ignited and set free and expressed with purpose. It's a journey and it's a process, and one that unfolds slowly through reflection, through experience, and through sincere curiosity about what it means to be alive. So as we walk this path, we are not escaping the reality of the world. We are learning to engage in a new way, with clearer eyes, an open heart, and a deeper sense of what truly matters. And we can begin to see beyond the surface. Spiritualism isn't about accumulating answers. It is about quietening the noise long enough to hear the subtle voices of the spirit world and of the soul. So let us continue this journey with curiosity, with humility and joy. For in every question whispered into the silence, for every message felt in the heart, every healing offered or received, we are not just practicing spiritualism. We are remembering the most essential truth that has echoed through time, through the temples, the forests, the deserts, and to all the visions of all time, from ancient to today. We are spirit, we are eternal, and we are never, ever alone. Thank you for your time. You know, I'm laughing. I am Irish, obviously. You know that. But putting two T's together, I should have changed that today. So, if there are any comments or questions, I am gratefully happy to receive them. Oh, hello.
Hiya. I'd like to just turn around and say that I'm new to trying to find my higher power. I've come here due to I went to AA, which is Alcohol Anonymous, and they do a spiritual thing to try to help you along with not going back to alcohol and doing normal mundane life. And since doing that and since coming here, I feel amazing.
Wonderful.
I feel amazing. I do. And listening to you today, just now, it's because I came here to find it. You know, I just understand everything that you're saying, especially as it comes throughout the previous years. And I totally understand it. Look at me, we got my jewels on and me, you know, and I play Buddha music, play this. I'm a mixed up spiritual person. But yeah, so thank you.
You're most welcome.
Made me realise that what I'm thinking is actually the right direction that I'm going.
Well, that's very beautiful for you.
Okay.
And I'm very pleased that you're following your own feelings. I know initially you had to have an assist to see that awakening, but you're embracing it. So
yeah, I think I always knew, but it wasn't for certain. So and now I'm more, I lean to it. I pray every day. I'm walking that my own spiritual path to try.
Yeah, and it's a process.
I'm seeing within 3 months that my life is so much. I've got no different. Nothing else material, and I don't need any material. You know, I'm coming here, I'm listening to you, and people around me are just so much nicer. I never knew that, so.
I'm just very happy for you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, wonderful.
So has anyone got any questions at all or comments?
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Have you been to visit any of the original architectures from the ancient civilizations that we are aware of in places like Turkey and
I have seen a couple in Turkey, but they were Christian orientated, they were Catholic orientated, and if I had more money, I would. If I had more money, but I've looked at them online. But the power and the energy from places where people have prayed or huge experience have occurred can be felt if you just give it a moment. People go, feel nothing. That's fine. That's fine. When you think back at it in your mind, it will rise. Have you?
In Cyprus, yes. Probably not quite so ancient civilizations, but there's probably layers underneath that have not been discovered yet.
Yeah.
But I always feel like when visiting those sort of places, that it feels like you're stepping into quiet, that's in the air, a quietness in the air, and time stands still.
Yeah.
It's as if it's not carrying on until you step out again to go about and have some lunch or something. So.
I like that. I like the sound of that experience, and I think sometimes through meditation we can actually incorporate that in time standing still, but nothing stands still. It's a process, but it's the beautiful feeling of being a part of something that's ancient and important. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Can I just quickly add? I always find it very interesting when people walk into old churches, cathedrals, first thing everybody does, they go quiet.
Yeah, it's a presence, isn't it?
You know, we naturally find that. We walk through those doors and we just go, oh, we recognise it.
We all good? Happy out?
Yeah.
We're ancient and modern.
That was wonderfully brought together. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
So we've got 5 minutes in between. So if you need to do whatever, please do whatever.
I'd be glad to sit down.
Next up will be the.
I'm limping now because I'm standing.
Yeah. 1:30. We have lovely Jason will be working.
Did I go on a bit? Did I?
No, you're good.
What? Yeah.
Really good what you were saying.
Yeah. No major controversy.
No, disappointing. I believe that's a Stephen.
No, I need to sit for a while.
About a 10-minute break back here.